homes are essentially mini power plants if you really have solar, or because there are homes everywhere, right? So there are homes where there's great wind, there are homes where there's great sun, there's homes where there's great geothermal. There are various sources for energy on this planet, and there are homes everywhere. So why not use these homes as power plants for AI?
Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, where we ask your favorite builders the questions you wish you could ask them yourself. This is a production of neonewstoday.com, and I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode, we're joined by Greg Osuri, the founder of Akash Network and CEO of Overclock Labs. Akash is a decentralized, open source cloud computing marketplace that allows users to buy and sell GPU and CPU resources at lower costs than traditional peers. In this conversation, we talked about the difficulties of scaling infrastructure, how cloud computing shaped Greg's views on growth, the role of data centers today, how homes can provide the necessary energy for local compute, AI agents and privacy, and Greg's 4-year outlook, amongst so many more topics. Just a reminder, nothing said in this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the host or guest might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a full disclaimer at www.neonewstoday.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing on your favorite podcasting platform and sharing with friends and family. Every rate, review, like, comment really helps us get in front of more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. So with all that said, I really enjoyed this conversation with Greg, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. Super psyched for today's conversation. We're joined by Greg Osuri, the founder of Akash Network and CEO of Overclock Labs. And for those of you who don't know what Akash is, it is described as the Airbnb for data centers. How you doing today, Greg?
Doing so well. Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, we were already going into so many great topics before we even hit the record button. And before we delve into all of that, I just want to take like a quick step back. And when you look at the genesis of your career and your arc, you've worked in different companies all over the US, Austin, SF, Nashville, Detroit. And in a time when there's just so much divisiveness on CT and just in general, what do you think, working in all these different regions of the US, what's something that connects people all over the country?
No, what is the core American identity? Now, I'm an immigrant, right? And when I moved to US in 2004, about 22 years ago, the common theme that you would feel in the US is the freedom, particularly freedom to fail, I think, and freedom to pioneer,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's one unique thing that I see that's unique to America, compared. And I'd never really worked outside US. I mean, I straight out of college, I was recruited, and brought here. And yeah, the ability to speak up and express yourself. I mean, that's what you say, freedom of speech. And I think that we talk about free speech all over the world in democracy, but I think it's fundamentally ingrained in the American identity, compared to any other country I've seen or I've been to. And people do exercise their right, which is very attractive, right? And also, I think there's a lot of. No, I've been studying free economies and free market systems, and look at an American experiment. How the country was created and founded, um, the attachment to the founding of the nation, the values the nation was founded, is significantly stronger in the US than any other country I've been to. Now, I don't want to name countries, and I was born and raised in India. The more you look at, I love India is a great country, but the more you look at the founding story of the nation, and I mean, India was founded as a region about 2,000-3,000, 4,000 years ago, right? Uh, so I guess maybe the age, maybe how old things like there's a disconnect between the founding of the country or the founding of
Mm.
the region to the people and the identity. And America was founded in 1776, and I think there's maybe that has to do quite a lot with like your identity, right? If you ask an Indian, like, what is your origin story? Everyone will have different stories. I mean, I'm not talking about post-colonialism, the modern India. That's that's well known. But where did Indians come from? Or
Mhm.
even go to Britain, where British people come from? Is it Germanic tribes or Anglo-Saxons, or is it French? There is no common identity, I feel like, when it comes to origin stories. And I think that's very unique in America. You find that foundation, the shared value system, still continues till date. The freedom expression, um, and guns. Now, I've lived all over America. I mean, I'm a gun owner, proud gun owner. I love my freedom. You can't, if you go to Japan and be like, hey, I want to explore some guns, they will put you in jail. I mean, it's scary. People don't look at guns the same way, I think. Um, and I remember I was living in Detroit, 2004. It's a trick, right? Detroit was a special place uh, to say the least. And I used to hear gunshots from my apartment. It was in Southfield, Michigan. You literally hear gunshots in the night, and that's like very uncommon, right? In any other country. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I think freedom. I mean, as cringy as it sounds, freedom is a natural as a it's a common theme. I feel like that's across America.
I don't think that that's the wrong answer at all. My Spanish tutor lives in Colombia, and we constantly talk about how he wishes he had access to just be able to work in America and be able to build a business here. And even though he's a tutor and has a lot of students all over the world, he still is kind of restricted to Colombia. And there's this and he admits that it's this trope that the rest of the world has, that you can make more money and ergo have more freedom in America, and it's just something he wishes he had access to. So I love that response. I don't think it should be taken as tongue in cheek that we value freedom and that that's something that's inherently good to people who want to build here. So I guess this is also a great time to kind of like hear your equal and opposite stance on your initiation into blockchain and to crypto. When was the first time you heard about Bitcoin or Ethereum? And what were your initial thoughts when you first came across it?
Well, for someone who was terminally online, who still is on Hacker News or you know Silicon Valley. I mean, I moved to San Francisco in 2006. It's Hacker News, Reddit, of the world. That's my source of news, right? I think I heard about Bitcoin. Is it 2010
Mm.
or around that time frame? I can't quite remember now. Yeah, I think 2010. Well, the real answer was, did I use Bitcoin for purchasing something that you can't use cash for? That's the real answer. That's the first time I heard about Bitcoin. I remember downloading the wallet. I can't remember quite which wallet it was. I remember downloading the wallet. This was 2010. Uh, and I remember going to certain websites that are not accessible from your traditional web, um, and purchasing something that I would call the most expensive purchase of my life in hindsight. I think that's when. So Bitcoin for me was a utility.
Awesome.
It was never. I mean, I was not. I mean, a software engineer. I was not big on economics and whatnot. Only until later, I think I met a bunch of hackers, um, good friends of mine in security. I mean, in cybersecurity space, and they were telling me how. And these are like anti-statists, and whatever you want to call them. These people are talking about how about a money without a state? Like that I didn't quite grasp that concept. I understood Bitcoin as this electronic cash, and it was useful for me back then. Um, and I think I was started getting more interested in blockchain after Ethereum.
Mm.
2015, Ethereum smart contracts. I think it was called Ethereum Frontier, if I remember correctly. This was the first time you made a a decentralized database that's useful. I mean, Bitcoin was definitely a very simple database that was fascinating, but I think Ethereum sort of made that simple database programmable, and that was fascinating for me as an engineer because I'm like, oh wow, a permissionless rights, which is, by the way, if you're so some history. I was working a lot of several startups across the world. I worked at IBM. I worked at large companies, small companies, all different sizes across America. One thing you realize is scaling is extremely hard, um, especially at web scale, right? So web started taking off, I would say in like 2009, 2010, like really taking off in terms of scale. And I was involved in several scaling initiatives across US, and horizontally scaling is extremely challenging, right? So, and the challenging part is, sure, putting servers and compute out there, all that is okay, but security, when you have to place a server in an unknown region, you don't know the trust envelope of the region, right? You don't really know who has access to what, and so exchanging keys becomes extremely complicated.
Hmm.
So how about a database where there is no key exchange, a public key cryptography based database? That's very fascinating for a distributed systems engineer because now that's scalable infinitely. You don't need to bootstrap with a key to establish trust. So for me, and I think I heard about Ethereum at a Golang conference, GopherCon in 2014, 2015 timeframe. Someone was telling me like this is a really cool technology, and I started looking into it more deeply. And that was when I felt okay, this makes sense now, more than Bitcoin. But Bitcoin or the electronic cash made sense. Um, and I started like 2016. I think we started taking Ethereum more seriously. I've been hearing Ethereum quite a lot. Actually, one of the guy who used to work with, his name is Roman Storm. He's famous now. He used to work at a company I used to work at, Demand Base. He was a junior engineer back then. And he was all about Ethereum. Well, like he's one of those. I don't know if he's going to listen to this, but I like Roman. Come a long way. And then he was talking about 10 years ago. He was a junior engineer. He's one of those guys that's always on crypto or whatnot. And he was all about Ethereum. It's so funny. And you'll see his Facebook posts from 10 years ago and take him very seriously back then. So there are a lot of friends in our circles that were talking about Ethereum and we talk just to come to San Francisco all the time. Signing here quite a lot. I was going to a lot of these meetups in 2016, 2017. I think 2017 is when it really blew up. I remember San Francisco used to be, wow. Anywhere you go, it was all like how AI is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, Ethereum and crypto was, and there used to be this like this, I want to say hacker houses, crypto houses. A lot of people that are no longer relevant now. Metal Pay What's his name? I forgot. He was pretty big back then. There's another guy called Jeremy from Augur with Jeremy. God, I forgot this kid's name. Super young. This kid's super young, like making a lot of money. XRP. I remember um, becoming friends with the CTO of Ripple, and then so a lot of these people were very smart people, very intelligent people. Convinced me to go into like crypto full time. I think 2016, 2017, we went full time. Like late 2016, and then we had published the white paper because Akash, at the beginning we wanted to create a sorry, not we, as an industry. I think it was a bigger problem in the cloud industry where cloud was getting extremely popular because the scaling challenges of 2020, 2011 really proved out that, scaling is very hard. So especially doing it yourself as a company is extremely hard. But getting servers from Amazon for your burst capacity, because you can't have a data center and expect to put compute in a reasonable, timely fashion. Versus someone like cloud where you can just be like, hey, I want more compute and give it to me. That was an enormous shift in terms of scalability because until then, there was never a concept of getting a server in a matter of hours. It used to take days to put a server. I mean, you used to get servers are literally like big machines where you bring them and you assemble them and ship them. I was going to data centers. I was doing all that stuff. When cloud came and said, hey, you don't have to do any of that. All you need to do is just click a button, API, you get a server. I'm like, that is unbelievable in terms of how fast you can scale. Cloud really took off. Amazon Web Services really took off. The danger, I was a big proponent of Amazon Web Services at Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare provider. I used to work there for a little bit, and I designed the entire internal system. I designed their internal cloud. And I pushed Amazon Web Services into Kaiser. This is 2006 and 2007 timeframe. I just loved everything about it. And then I was using the cloud so much that I realized that, and also a big open source person at that point, cloud was getting increasingly divergent from its user base, people like me, to becoming more enterprise and more closed. And that's something that people in the academia and the industry noticed, I think, early enough and found it to be challenging. And there was an effort to make open source cloud. There's OpenStack. There's a whole lot of efforts that were used to make cloud open source. And nothing really succeeded. Because you can have the software as open source, but cloud is more than software. It's hardware too. So you almost need to build a network that is open source, meaning anyone can see the source code, anyone can contribute, it's fully transparent. Also an incentive mechanism to connect to the network. I think that really clicked for us. And we thought, a blockchain could be an incredible solution to keep software open source, build open source networks, permissionless networks, and actually see what happens. We published a paper in 2017, outlining our thoughts, and that was an instant hit. The paper that became the Akash white paper, and we used to have white papers back then, right? And we ended up building the network. It was still experiment after experiment. Still an experiment, I feel like, because we haven't fully succeeded yet in getting there. But it's a series of experiments that proved. And we didn't have, like any experiments, you don't really have conviction till you see data. So we didn't have massive conviction if this is even going to work, right? So we couldn't raise we didn't raise capital because you can't go to investors and be like, hey, this is going to work with a straight face. Because we're like, this is crazy. As crazy as it sounds, it may work. There's probably a 1% chance it'll work. If it works, then it's like the best thing in the world, right? and one after another, which led to this moment, right? That's why we raised in total about $2 million, I think, change $1 million, and a long time ago, and we just kept building and building and building. And of course, it became a success story, and I still feel like this is, and one thing we were very, very good at and we're still very good at is calling out and predicting technologies, right? Like we predicted in 2020 that there's going to be a chip shortage, GPU shortage.
Mhm.
We predicted 2 years ago there's going to be energy shortage. We were good at picking technologies. Picking Cosmos was the right move technology wise, right? And a lot of challenges for Cosmos, but in 2020 or 2020, I'd say 2019 timeframe, we initially launched an Ethereum, and after using Ethereum, we were like, well, this is not going to work out. Layer 1 hasn't figured out, Ethereum L1 still hasn't figured out how to scale. And that was the right move, not to build on a layer 1, which was Ethereum was the only one at that point. Funny enough, I met Anatoly at a conference in 2018. They were called Loom, Solana before Solana. I was really passionate about scaling blockchains and whatnot. He showed me a time, I forgot what it was called. My memory serves, but there's a YouTube video on Solana's channel from 2018. You can't really see my face, but you can see on the bottom, you can hear my voice, and there's my name and Toli. This was the first ever interview for Anatoly on stage. And I liked him so much. I was like, I read the paper, and I think we invited him to tell the story of Loom, which eventually became Solana, on stage. And back then I was better than him in explaining technology. So he's super nerd. He's super technical. So I was on a hunt to find a scalable layer 1. And we ended up choosing Tendermint, which eventually became Cosmos SDK, because there was no layer 1 that could scale. Solana was not built until Solana's beta launch was 2020, March, right before COVID. And I was there in their offices because, again, if you go to Solana YouTube, you'll see a lot of history about Solana. And I really captured photographs in black and white right before the launch, so it's kind of cool. And making the bet on Cosmos is the right bet. Making the bet on AI is the right bet. Making the bet on energy now, I think it's going to be the right bet as well.
I just want to jump in here because there's so many, you've called a lot of great bets. I wish we could go back in time and take a bet on the price of Bitcoin and ETH, but we can't. And so you talked about building out the cloud compute infrastructure at Kaiser. I lived in the Bay Area for 3 years. I was across the Bay in Oakland. And during my tenure there, 2015 to 2018, I wasn't necessarily running into super crypto optimists. I was running into skeptics. And frankly, a lot of people, 2018-ish is when I moved back to Colorado. Largely because I felt that a lot of folks saw crypto as a threat to the VC model. They didn't like this external fundraising model. I could be right, I could be wrong. That being said, the experiences you had at Kaiser, building out the cloud infrastructure there, the experiences you had with being a scaling nerd and seeing how difficult it was for compute to scale, did deciding in 2017, 18, 19, when you're writing the Akash white paper and launching the company, did you already mention this, that you had like a 1% chance to succeed, but what gave you the faith to kind of go into a peer-to-peer decentralized compute kind of marketplace and to build something like Akash out? Sure, you might have had the support from your peers that you're rubbing elbows with a lot of blockchain and decentralized folks. So you know that there are other believers that are building, and so you're armed with a community to build out decentralized solutions. But as cloud infrastructure is becoming more and more enterprise, is becoming more and more closed, it must have felt like this was an even bigger David versus Goliath fight to say, I'm going to go out and build a decentralized peer-to-peer marketplace. So what did you see back then that gave you the faith that this is something I can build out? And in what ways, as we see today with Akash's success with a lot of Web3 integrations, especially with the taking off of AI and clause in general, what really has played out from your initial thesis in the early days?
Cloud was growing at a rate that to compete with the cloud, it didn't seem like a practical, even pragmatic. If you go to a VC and be like, you're going to compete with Amazon Web Services, they will laugh at you, right? I mean, even still they do. So only way you can compete with cloud or build an alternative version of cloud is by doing something they cannot do, right? Like you cannot go compete with Roger Federer in tennis, but you can compete with him in basketball, So what is one thing we identified the cloud can never do is tap into existing data centers, because cloud is built on the notion of control. They need very strong control over every aspect, from supply chain to pricing to security and whatnot. So where they don't have control is inside your home, right? Inside someone else's data centers, inside compute. So the conviction that we had was the compute cloud is the fabric that holds the modern society together. There's no doubt about it, right? It is the foundation for all our lives. And this particular podcast right now is streamed from the cloud. Everything you do and you touch is on the cloud. And there will come a point where cloud consumption outpaces the supply for the compute. There will come a point. It was very obvious. It wasn't exactly obvious what particular resource would be constrained at what time, in the sense like GPU constraints or bandwidth constraints or memory constraints or energy constraints or water constraints. There's a lot of different aspects that are involved in building a data center. It wasn't very obvious when will happen what, but we did have conviction that at the rate at which the data was growing, there is no single company in the world that can catch up and scale. So the obvious answer is a grid model, in the sense everybody, grid not in a hub and spoke manner, in a peer-to-peer manner, where there is compute everywhere. It's compute everywhere. Like, look around you in your home alone, right? My gaming machines, my TVs, my refrigerators, there is compute everywhere. Now more and more with vehicles and a whole lot of things. There's a lot of compute just sitting around everywhere. So now, is that compute necessarily usable? No, it's not yet. But if we go down the path, can it become usable? And I think yes. And I think, and it's becoming more obvious now. You look at a lot of things have been calling out about electric vehicles being data centers on wheels. I tweeted this about 5 years ago, and you see Elon Musk talking about robo taxis as becoming a potential data centers on wheels because they do have GPUs. I mean, just that. I mean, he's definitely forward-thinking person, and the constraints around why you can't have that, but those are solvable constraints. So that was a conviction for us. Like, yes, cloud can get big as it can, but there will come a point that if you go down the stack enough, there will come a point that you cannot scale further than that. Then what happens? So, and that first point was proven to us in 2024 when GPU crisis happened. So literally, cloud ran out of GPUs. You could not get GPUs on Amazon Web Services or any other cloud provider. But people did have GPUs in their data centers or homes. That was the first time Akash saw incredible success in terms of our utilization went up, like whatever GPUs we can get our hands on and whatnot. That's when I think we were not ready for that level of scale, from a blockchain standpoint. But nevertheless, it was a proof point that, hey, our thesis is proven out. I mean, whatever we wrote in the white paper is proving out the thesis, at least. So every step of the way, I think that's what kept us really moving, right? I mean, every step of the way we keep building. And there's always a challenge. Demand supply. Now, the chips shortage has been, the thought chip shortage was solved. Like in 2025, when you had this enormous, I think, production increase from NVIDIA. I mean, H100s alone saw a 4x increase, a 4-time increase in production, because the demand was so high. But now the memory shortage is leading to a whole new set of challenges. So they know, I mean, now H100s are out. We can't really get H100s anywhere, right? God knows why. And there's these waves, and with agents now, I think we kind of know why, because agents are consuming so much more tokens that cloud has to really disable, like, like Overclock of the world. And that's just the beginning, right? I mean, we haven't even touched maybe even 1-2% of the humanity that could leverage. Imagine, I mean, agents now are so expensive. You spend tens of thousands of dollars a month on paying Claude. I mean, Claude, Anthropic booked right now about $30 billion in annualized revenue, right? I mean, that's unbelievable. Or monthly revenue, I can't remember. It's so big that I lost track of how much you guys are making. And that's just scratching the surface as to what we can do. And most of these are in software development, right? We haven't touched other areas. What does that mean to society, right? Because the compute is so expensive right now. When you measure how much compute you need to get a simple task done, right? Like Cloud Cowork, for example. So, and the shortage is going to get worse. And what happens when you have shortage? You borrow from peers, borrow from your neighbors. What Akash enables is borrowing compute power from your neighbors that are not in physically geographical accessible distance for you. I mean, basically making anyone your neighbor that you can borrow from. That's the thesis, and I still continue to believe, and I will continue to believe for God knows however long. But yeah,
I get the vision. I actually had David Johnston from Morpheus on the podcast about a month and a half ago, and he completely claw-pilled me. And ever since then, I've never touched AI more in my life than I have in the past 6 weeks. And so I get it. And we're just at the vanguard. We're just at the forefront. This is just the geeks and the technologists who are getting their hands on this technology. Ultimately, we're moving to a world where when I onboard into a new company, I'm going to get an email address, and I'm also going to get an AI agent. And the agent is going to work on my behalf. And as you accurately pointed out, we're running into these crises of compute. Anthropic can't even keep up with OpenClaw demand. They have to basically block people out. So this world is when the cost really starts to make so much more sense. And so just to give the listeners a little bit more of an understanding, where is the GPU and the CPU on the Akash network being sourced from? You're starting to talk very granularly of like my Tesla being able to one day possibly provide compute that works if we have like a hyper local model, like a Gemini, that's even more optimized to operate on something that small. But we're getting to this world where we're going to need to use every piece of GPU and every CPU we can. Today, where is this being sourced on Akash network? Is this being sourced from like my spare laptop that I just have up and running and I'm connected to the Akash network? Is it being sourced from like a data center that's just not big enough to compete with the largest data centers, but still offers a lot of power? What's the underlying network of where we borrow this compute from when we're using Akash?
Until about a few weeks ago, most compute in Akash was primarily from data centers, smaller data centers, not hyperscalers. When I talk about, you call these data centers edge data centers, anything less than 10 megawatt capacity is considered edge. And 10 megawatt is a sweet spot. Like, for context, 10 megawatts can host up to about 1,000 H100s, to give an idea. 10 megawatt is not quite training scale. That means you can't really train on a 10 megawatt, It's great for inference and great for a lot of other edge use cases. Most of the compute is coming from then. This is not cloud is hyperscalers are 50 to 100 megawatt data centers, right? Larger, 50 plus above, or even 100 plus above. So, and there are a lot of the small guys that are all over all over the world. I mean, tapping into energy sources that are significantly cheaper than what you would otherwise pay at a hyperscale data center. And now we are moving into homes. We announced HomeNode at Akash.network. What's fascinating about homes is homes are essentially mini power plants if you really have solar, or, because there are homes everywhere, right? So there are homes where there's great wind, there are homes where there's great sun, there's homes where there's great geothermal. There are various sources for energy on this planet, and there are homes everywhere. So why not use these homes as power plants for AI? And so I testified about this in Congress last May, about potentially solving the energy crisis by using homes as sources, because homes have one main advantage commercial data centers do. Homes are dual purpose. In the sense, you're using energy for yourself, for your family, and there's always excess energy that you can use to contribute to an AI network. So either through training or either through inference, right? We'll be making an announcement very soon, maybe a week or two, with an incredible story about how one company, this is a publicly traded company, leveraged this network to really show that you can do it at scale. So you can have computers at home do inference because they're usually asynchronous, right? So you don't need very strong networking, for example. They can be more fault tolerant because, homes, you never know the reliability of the network of compute. As long as you have energy that you're sourcing for cheap, like my own home in California has solar, right? My net, my net spend on energy is zero, right? In fact, they'll pay me to use energy at this point. But all the excess energy I use for AI. I have local clusters at home that I run really well. I also have a very interesting setup where my home is entirely run by agents at this point, all the way from security to monitoring to presence. Just a lot of use cases that I use agents at home. And because of the nature of the data, it's very intimate, and all of my cameras are hooked up to my AI agent. I need local inference because I would never trust cloud on terms of privacy, right? General rule of thumb is if agent that leaves your network, doesn't matter how secure it is potentially vulnerable to attack vectors that you have no idea, no control over. So if you are a privacy freak in terms of keeping data locally, and there are ways you can minimize like attacks where we spread your data in multiple computers through multi-party computation and PCs and whatnot. But generally speaking, I like to keep my data local, and I like to use my models local. These models don't have access to internet. They don't. The moment you connect to the internet, you're at risk, right? So that compute that I use at home is now part of Akash network, HomeNode, right? And we're going to open up the computer world, and I'm a lot more convinced that as the models get more optimal in terms of training, you have higher chances of succeeding from a home-based computer than a data center-based computer. There are companies now, not well known, a company called Pluralis, which I'm a big fan of, has figured out how to do heterogeneous computing for training. What that means is if you look at AI training today, it's very homogeneous. That means if you have H100s, you need to have H100s because training happens in multiple batches, and each batch, the speed of the batch completion or the time a batch takes to complete is the time it takes for the slowest node in the batch to complete. What that means is if you have like 10 H100s and you have one A100, which is slower, the batch will only complete after the A100 is complete. So all the H100s stay as straggler nodes. They just stay back. So it really doesn't matter what kind of compute. So as long as one slow node, your whole training run is slowed down. So that problem has been solved by a company called Pluralis. So what that means is you can have multiple nodes all over the world, all kinds of nodes, big and small, and still be able to do training at high efficiency. And there's several problems with training, be it a big problem is shatter. I mean, how much of data that goes back and forth between these nodes, the more number of more parameters means better models, means much more chatter, reducing the chatter, optimizing the gradient sizes, and a lot of things that were under research and works over the last, I would say, 2 years. Really, distributed trading has been, evolving. Now, I think we're at a point distributed trading is possible. I mean, there's a subnet in BitTensor called Templar. They recently trained a 72 billion parameter model fully on distributed network. Now, for comparison, I use Llama 70 billion parameter model at home, which is a very capable model. And it lets me run on my consumer hardware fairly well. With decent, of course, I can't run 405B, which is much larger. I can't run really large models with the efficiency without having H100s at home. But I can run 70 billion parameter model, which is honestly very good if you know what you're doing. If you're not, if you're not coding on it, which I don't need to for the things I do at home. Frankly, a 70 billion parameter model can be now trained on a fully distributed network. And that's a big deal, which was done by previously. That 70B was trained by Meta in their massive data centers. You don't need a Meta to produce a 70 billion parameter model. So distributed training is evolving very rapidly. And with this energy crisis, I think it's going to take off. So I'm very excited for decentralized training to succeed, where your home computers can be leveraged because your energy cost is going to be a bigger variable than anything. I mean, chip cost is obviously variable, but energy cost is going to be a bigger variable. And there's also moratoriums now on data centers. So Maine just introduced a law I saw. Bernie Sanders is all about calling it a federal level moratorium. Democrats are going to sweep, next year, I suppose. They're going to introduce all kinds of moratoriums on new data center builds. And I'm genuinely, and I don't want that to slow down AI progress. I think we got a few years to figure out how to do distributed trading at scale. It's going to happen. And I think these moratoriums, these, energy challenges, regulatory challenges are going to force distributed trading. So I'm extremely bullish in terms of where this is going.
I flew to DC in 2023 with Stand With Crypto to talk with Colorado legislators about pro-crypto legislation. And so at the risk of opening a philosophical can of worms, why do you think that distributed systems are under such attack? Why are distributed money networks under attack from the powers that be in DC? Why are we starting to see data center moratoriums? How does this all play into this looming energy crisis that we're staring right down the barrel of?
Well, that's a big question. Two separate parts, right? So one is the money part, decentralized systems. Well, if you really look at the origin of Bitcoin, it is a cyberpunk origin. And the state has always been about cyberpunk. If you look at the first crypto wars, the state didn't want you to have encryption, cryptography. They fought really hard to make sure the cryptography was only available to national security agencies, right? It's not a new thing that the crypto wars 2.0 is surprising. And there's a book by Stephen Levy called Crypto Wars. I mean, this is about the crypto war 1.0. Highly recommend folks read that. And apparently, like public key cryptography, which is considered one of the most important innovations, was all. I think NSA figured that out like 40 or 50 years ago, way before these nerds could figure it out. So, the Hellman algorithms, all these were like pretty, NSA knew about a lot of, were using all this advanced cryptography long before common people could. So the state is always after control, because it's one thing a state can have is control. So when you come and say that, hey, look, there's a money system you can't control, people hate it. I mean, people hated gold because you can't control gold, and that's why you have, Bretton Woods, and that's why you have this fractional reserve banking. That's why you have all these like things where the government can control the money supply. So, surprisingly, Donald Trump, not surprisingly, I mean, because Trump Organization was debanked, right after his first term, I think the Trump administration, or Trump in general, changed his stance on Bitcoin. He was hating Bitcoin for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was a victim of debanking, he understood the value of banking. So I don't think you're going to have another president that is pro-Bitcoin. Again, of course, there's other aspects of the Trump Organization, which I don't want to get into politics, but sure, I'm not saying superiority, I'm saying, but just to see why the current administration is pro crypto, that's one of his reasons. And if you look at what's happened in the Clarity Act, right now, the biggest opposition for Clarity Act are the establishment banks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's fights about yields, such simple thing as yields, because banks think they cannot compete because banks keep the profits. Like unlike yields, I mean, the yields are basically coming from the treasury yields. Banks keep the treasury yields and give you like minuscule portion, like 0.1% or saving account, or probably less, right? Like, so when you threaten their livelihood, they're going to come back and attack. So there's a lot of, and banking lobby is extremely powerful lobby. I mean, they have pretty much every politician you can think about in their pockets. So there's the incumbents that are very anti-innovation, and there is the state that wants control. So combine them, you're going to see a lot of opposition towards a free money system. Now, when it comes to AI, I think the left in general, and this is very clear, left again are, for lack of a better reason, I think pro-regulation, because they feel like they didn't quite get to have a say. And they did have, during the Biden administration, looking at some of the interviews, they tried to regulate AI to a point that they wanted more control on AI. AI was getting out of control, according to them, which I don't think is true. And they try to impose quite a lot of control over OpenAI and Anthropic. And Anthropic is very pro-regulation. There's a lot of like panels as to see the Anthropic leadership, how pro-control they are. And there's a lot of crony capitalism happening there, saying regulatory advantage, where Anthropic would get a free pass and no one else could develop, AI that's as powerful as Anthropic because they have a regulatory advantage. That's all very common playbook, right? That's what SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried did, regulatory arbitraging.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of very powerful lobbies that are arbitraging with regulatory stance, taking by having powerful lobbies. I think that's what's contributing. Now, moratoriums are not uncommon. The Luddites, for example, in the 1920s or 1910s, during the Industrial Revolution, when the textile manufacturing, where you had to spin the wheel, right? When machines came and replaced humans, the Luddites were very anti-machines, right? Because for them, is their jobs. I think AI moratoriums are going through a similar phase as to what Luddites went through in the early early 20th century, where there is genuine um, concern for job loss. And I think I don't think it's like unfounded.
Mhm.
And I do believe there is going to be a replacement, at least in the short term. So short term, it's going to be very challenging to navigate this job displacement. And long term, I think it's going to be different. And if you look at Democrats, right, or the left in general, sorry, I won't call Democrats fully left, but there's fractions of Democrats that are not very left. But the left in general has always been pro jobs in terms of like more people need to have work more than pro outcome, right? A good portion of US GDP is because of government spending. And a lot of that comes from, if you look at California, look at the wastage. A lot of it comes from like, oh, we're going to spend money to keep so that people have jobs more than, hey, we're going to spend money because we want a certain outcome. And I think, so when you threaten jobs, which AI most likely will, Democrats will, or the left will basically do anything in its power to reduce that. And the moratoriums are calling for a 1 month or like 1 year pause, 2 year pause. I don't think anything is going to come out of that, except decentralized AI taking a more center stage. I do want a moratorium so people understand the value of decentralized AI, right? So I think it's inevitable. I mean, I'm very bullish on decentralized AI. It's inevitable. That also makes me, what am I doing, right? I don't know, man. I've been feeling like buying a farm lately in Northern California. I look at technologies and look at, I've been pretty good at calling out tech in terms of the success, and I can see, for some reason I have a particular skill in seeing trajectory and having reasonably correct assumptions or predictions. I'm looking at AI. I think there's going to be quite a lot of job displacement, but also I think it's going to be like software engineers are going to be impacted quite a lot more than what people think they will be. And I have a really bad feeling about this. So software engineers that identify themselves as programmers more than engineers that identify themselves as builders. If you're identifying yourself as a front-end developer or a back-end developer, you're not going, you'll be out of a job in 2-3 years. I mean, I'm very serious about this. But if you identify yourself as a builder, in the sense that you're not afraid of picking up a problem and solving the problem, using AI is wonderful. Building means your problem may not be solved just using compute or software. I mean, or you had to be like multidisciplinary in terms of front end, back end. Doesn't matter what part of the stack you have expertise in. Those people are going to be successful. But people that identify themselves as front ends and back ends are going to be out of a job. And when that happens, what is Silicon Valley going to look like? Is there going to be mass chaos? Because there's so many graduates that come out, and I've seen personally, that go into specializations too early. And you go into specialization too early, which is against, again, people want you to go special. I mean, if you ask me for advice 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, people will tell you to go specialize because that's where you have expertise. Right now, it's the opposite. You have to be more broad. You have to be more macro and like jack of all trades, for lack of a better word, master of none, because mastering is AI. AI is mastering. AI can do math way better than most graduates can at this point. You don't need specialized skills. That's what AI is going to give you. But you need to know how to bring things together, architect things, design things. And with AI, I have pretty good confidence that I can become a farmer, because ultimately, if you go down the stack, what's going to be more scarce is ultimately food and water. And that's what it comes down to, right? Food, water, shelter, right? So these are the three covenants of life. And ultimately that's going to become scarce. And I know I sound like a doomer, but I have a really strong feeling about this.
Well, let's we have a little bit of time left, about 5 minutes, and I guess the one thing that I can relate is I've never been busier in my life than when I started using OpenClaw and AI. Trying to replace myself has become one of the most difficult processes ever. Writing
Yeah.
articles, the pipeline for creating a podcast, just all the work that I do as a creator in the blockchain space and as a builder. It does seem like it's a little bit of a long haul to replace humans completely. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the human in the loop is still going to be the most important thing moving forward. It just depends on how many humans there will be in that loop. So, as we kind of like zoom out and wrap up, I think I want to touch on what is your perspective on how OpenClaw has increased demand for use on Akash network. And as you look forward, I'm not asking you to make another prediction, but where do you see the world in 2 to 4 years as OpenClaw is like here now? Pandora's box has been opened. We have AGI-ish, like autonomous-ish agents that can operate on our behalf 24/7. Where do you see us going now? And how does blockchain and decentralized infrastructure still have a role in that world?
I think by 2030, we are going to see a very different role than we have today. There's several things that are going on here. I think dollar is going to get weaker. So, and in dollar is a foundation of West. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Nothing really matters besides dollar. Second, resources are going to get more scarce. And the reason for that is because people can do more with less. People want more for less. Right? Like you said, you've never been busier. Like you can ask your OpenClaw to go figure out things that you haven't even fathomed to do, right? You have so much time. And it's not like we lack of ideas. We have a lot of ideas, it's just lack of resources to execute those ideas. Now, what that means is people are going to consume a lot more of resources. People that have the means are going to consume a lot more resources compared to people that have no access to AI.
Mm-hmm.
So resources are going to get more scarce. Right now we're seeing scarcity in compute, but I think that's going to go beyond just compute. And three, the displacement is going to be real. So people will be out of jobs, right? People that will be out of jobs are people that wouldn't be AI literate, right? So unless you use AI in the way that you're supposed to use AI, not just be like, hey, Cloud, write me a program, your job is going to be extremely challenging, right? So we've been having a lot of rotation internally as companies. I've seen a lot of my friends having rotations. People are letting junior engineers go. And because senior engineers can do 10 times more work now, right? So senior engineers, have the breadth of knowledge most juniors don't. I'm not saying young people are going to be unsuccessful. Young person that knows how to use AI is going to be extremely successful because they have the energy and time on the resource in the world. So I think we're just going to do a lot more, but less people are employed. I think the overall output will be significantly higher than what we have. So the outcome will be significantly more than what we even thought about. I think that will contribute to GDP growth. I mean, growing GDP in the single digit is very hard, by the way. But I think in like 5 years, there's going to be at least a single to 2-digit growth in GDP because of AI. I really believe that. But there will be less people employed. So it's going to be a strange world. There will be much higher gap between the wealth. The wealthy is going to get wealthier, considering dollar's strength as well, because the wealthy has usually are pretty decent at distributing or investing their wealth in more appreciating assets than depreciating like dollars. And I think it'll be a new world order. I mean, with what's happening geopolitically right now with Trump, making North American corridor more stronger, right? Because all the things. I mean, there's another way to look at what's happening geopolitically globally, right? Making the Strait of Hormuz is going to significantly impact Asia and Europe. U.S. is very good with oil. I don't think we have problems accessing oil. We have lots of oil. So Trump is redefining the world order, right? So that's going to have enormous impact in 4 years down the line. So I think America is going to be richer and richer. The world is going to be more poorer and poorer. And that'll open up a new era for decentralization. Right? I think stable coins, if you ask me a prediction in crypto, as much as I hate stable coins, but I think stable coins are going to become de facto because stable coins export dollar without restrictions. I think dollar is going to get strong. I mean, in terms of use, the value might against gold, when I say dollar is weak, because there's no other currency you can compete with, really, dollar. Dollar with all fiat is going to be the strongest. Dollar against gold is going to be very weak. Gold is hard. So I don't know crime and so many variables for me to think about. I can't really talk about the fall of civilization. I'm reading several books about civilization and the falls and whatnot. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think the BRICS of the world and any of these alternative economies are going to have a chance with what's happening right now. Another viewpoint of what Trump is doing, I think, is weakening the BRICS and weakening the Chinese rise. With the current oil prices, China's are going to have a very difficult time. And also, I think there's going to be enormous energy output in the States because of the investments that are going in right now. What's really exciting is I've been looking at the energy space quite a lot. Every step of the supply chain is very challenging in energy. I mean, energy is like, so a lot of people are using LNG now because that's the only reasonable way to scale. Renewables aren't that scalable, but it's super hard to get turbines. Like Siemens is a company that makes them, 14 years lead time right now. But there's so much innovation happening in turbine technology now. I mean, there's airline companies, pivoting to turbines now because they know how to make turbines. Jet engines are basically turbines. There's a company called Bloom Aerospace that was doing supersonic flights. Now they have a generator, right? So there's a lot of innovation happening in energy that hasn't happened in like 40 years, right? And energy is so important because you can solve a lot of problems with cheap energy. Like cheap energy means we can solve desalination. And like we talk about California not having enough water, Palisade fires, we have 11 reservoirs that are empty. And the dumbest question is like, why don't the sea everywhere? I mean, water. Why don't you desalinate? Well, it turns out desalinating. Middle East does a lot of desalination, right? All the Arab states and Israel, they figured it out. Why can't we do it? Well, it turns out energy, and there's a lot of regulation of energy. That's dumb California politics. But cheap energy means you can have water. Means more. I think production-wise, we're going to produce a lot more things like that we weren't able to do before. Because if you predict like energy going in the same direction as fiber did during the first dot-com boom, there's a lot of talk about fiber being the most important thing. There's fiber everywhere, right? And most of it's not used. It became dark fiber, actually. But energy can be used, unlike fiber, for other things. So I think producing more energy is going to just result in a lot more things, because with energy and water, you can pretty much solve hunger, solve a lot of things. So I think energy rich, though, if you ask 4 years from now, what will be energy rich? Dollar strong compared to other fiats. North Americans corridor much stronger. people production-wise, then GDP will be much higher growth. Employment will be significantly lower. And it'll be a strange world. So I don't know how to even picture it. And that's what I think. And decentralization will take a more center stage because moratoriums on AI data centers and all these will start kicking in. And decentralization, I think, will take a more obvious position because the only way to scale will be decentralized systems.
Well, thank you for walking through kind of the multi-network and multimodal thought process you have when you take a look at where the world's going to be in a few years. I can kind of see how you made so many right calls through this thought process that you just walked us through over the years historically. As we wrap up, for anybody who hasn't yet, go take a look at Akash Network's Q1. You guys had a killer Q1. The release of AEP 23 tokenomics, the home node. You guys just launched agents.akash.network. You had a phenomenal talk at NearCon SF. Just so much crusher activity for Akash. So it's a shame we didn't get to really dig into much of that. But I think
talked about Akash. It's amazing.
Yeah, just an awesome conversation, really about systems thinking and macroeconomic thinking. And I think that this is a perfect time for folks to really regroup and look at where we're going as a society, because we have hit a pivotal moment with energy, with AI, with how these tools are going to be impacting our lives. And I just thought that this was a fantastic conversation. And thank you so much for coming on to share the way in which you create your frameworks through which you look at the world, both what's happening today and how that's going to impact tomorrow, and a lot of the variables that are going into tomorrow. So, Greg, thank you so much for your time today. This was a fantastically awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Cheers. Thank you for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please show your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you, so please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube. And if you or someone you know would make for a great guest, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always on the hunt for fresh voices and new perspectives. And for our NEO token holders out there, please consider voting for NEO News Today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and we'll continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. Thanks one more time for listening to the Smart Economy podcast, and we can't wait to catch up with you next time.